Dear artists and music creators, 2025 takes off with fresh opportunities for government-funded grants, offering up to 30,000 to help finance your recording projects. But before we get to the grants, I want to share something even more valuable, something that will elevate every music project you take on. I recently watched an inspiring aviation documentary where a pilot explained a phenomenon called Demo-itis. It can happen when a pilot becomes so fixated on landing as planned that they lose the flexibility to adapt to changing conditions. This mindset can lead to cutting corners and taking unnecessary risks, such as forcing a landing when initiating a go-around would be the best option. Creatives deal with similar phenomenon. We call it Demo-itis. Here's a classic example. Movie directors work with music composers. In the early editing stages, directors often use temporary music as placeholders. If they hear that temp music over and over and over again, they can become so attached that when the real composer delivers a much better film score, they struggle to accept it. As a studio operator and mix engineer, I'm also at risk of falling into the same trap. For example, a rough mix printed at the end of a recording session usually sounds pretty good. And after repeated listens, the final mix, despite being objectively clearer, more balanced and better overall, just doesn't feel right anymore. And of course, I work with clients suffering from Demo-itis too. An early symptom might be a client telling me they've been tweaking their mix for weeks or months, but they can't get it past 90%, and they ask me to take it to 100% for them. Well, if one cannot get past 90%, mistakes were made around the 50% mark, which now manifests themselves as roadblocks. To fix that, I'd have to dig deep and debug somebody else's mix, and that's much more complex and time-consuming than starting the mix from scratch. But even if I started from scratch and delivered a 99 to 100% mix, a client suffering from Demo-itis has gotten so used to their own 90% mix that they are uncomfortable hearing their mix differently, even if different sounds objectively better. Being stuck in Demo-itis is like sitting on the runway with engines revving but never lifting off, burning all your fuel but not getting anywhere. The problem is, someone suffering from Demo-itis is rarely aware of their condition. So, why does Demo-itis even happen? Let's dig into the inner workings of our brains. Liking a song or not liking a song is never the outcome of a rational, analytical thinking process. Instead, our subconscious gut feeling makes that decision before our conscious mind even gets involved. That's why you tap your foot or bob your head to a song you like, even if your conscious mind is occupied in an engaging conversation or by driving in heavy traffic. And for our subconscious to like a sound, 3 conditions must be met. Our subconscious must recognize patterns in the sound. The sound invokes a familiar feeling, and we must be exposed to the sound pattern repeatedly. And this explains why catchy hook lines stick to our heads, and why ads are attention-grabbing and repeated endlessly. That's also why certain songs climb the charts after being played again and again by radio stations or in streaming playlists. And that's why we romanticize the inferior sound of vintage gear used in the classic recordings of gone-by decades, because we've listened to the music recorded with it since we were kids. So what can we learn from pilots? Spatial disorientation is a super dangerous phenomenon where a pilot develops an inaccurate perception of pitch, altitude, or motion, because the inner ear, responsible for balance, is misled by the flight forces. Just like spatial disorientation, a demo-itis is a distortion of our own perception that can lead us down the wrong path. To counteract, pilots split roles. One flies while the other monitors the instruments. They rely on gauges and the official horizon over bodily sensations. They follow structured flight plans and use checklists for unexpected events. Pilots are trained to detect spatial disorientation within themselves and drilled to execute escape maneuvers from muscle memory to regain control and avoid dangerous situations. Let me share with you how I overcome demo-itis. It's like an escape maneuver that we engineers use. Just like any other human, I've got good days and I also have got bad days occasionally. What helps me in all situations is a full awareness of how my perception can be blurred under certain conditions, and then controlling those conditions deliberately. Here are a few practical tricks that I use when mixing. Number 1. The best remedy is to take a decent break. By the time I finish a mix, I've heard it hundreds of times. I step away for a day or two to distance myself mentally. And when I return to it, I hear the mix objectively again with fresh ears. Number 2, I test mixes in different environments to see if my mix holds its integrity on imperfect speakers such as laptop speakers, Bluetooth speakers, and even my phone. And number 3, I distract my conscious mind by looping the mix, and then I walk into another room and focus on something completely different, such as soldering and maintenance tasks. My conscious mind is distracted. The sound plays in the background. If nothing grabs my attention, the mix is probably done. If something suddenly stands out, I know there's still work to do. So, how can you as a musician avoid demo-itis? Fortunately, demo-itis is treatable. And the best remedy is self-awareness and observing yourself objectively. Here's a few tricks of how to keep demo-itis in check. Number 1, don't over-listen. Don't listen on repeat again and again and again, and take long breaks between listening sessions. Number 2, finish your production within a reasonable time frame. A couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. But don't drag your project out for months or even years. You lose perspective and enthusiasm. And number 3, never ever put a limiter on an unfinished mix. It's like a pilot forcing a landing before they're ready, a recipe for crash landing. Limiters are a huge topic by themselves, and there's heaps more to unpack right here. So if you want to know more about this, let me know, and maybe I'll cover this in another newsletter. So, back to demo-itis. If you suspect you are suffering from demo-itis and you need your ears examined, I recommend consulting a professional for an expert second opinion. And I am very happy to listen and chat with you about your project. Simply reach out via my website, mixartist.com.au, to schedule a consultation session. All right, now that we've dropped any oversized demo-itis baggage, let's taxi full throttle to your music projects. Government grants of up to $30,000 are now up for grabs, but you need to act soon. Clearance for takeoff expires March 10th. First up, we have the Contemporary Music Development Grant for Recording, Content and Promotion, which expires March 10th. And then also, we have the Contemporary Music Development Grant for First Nations Creative and Professional Development. Also, again, applications close March 10th. Let's wrap it all together. Demo-itis won't crash your plane, but it can still store your progress. If you need fresh ears, I'm here to help. Sometimes a second opinion is all it takes to break the spell. And if you need help with your grant application, I'm here to help as well. So let's get in touch and let's chat about your music project. Thank you very much. Bye for now.